Hey everyone, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have the Pink & Main Crafty Courtyard March 2021 kit, which is called Hooray, and we have 5 cards, 1 kit. I will have the unboxing linked down below, and as far as I know, or as far as filming, that kit is still available. So let's get into it. Before starting any cards, I did go ahead and stamp out several of the images, and I colored those. These I colored with some Copic markers. I did with these as well, but this one I stamped using a gray ink. And so now we're going to get started with card number 1. I went ahead and stamped out that image using some Simon Hurley Create Tropical Tango, and then just colored in the flowers using some alcohol markers. I'm going to pull out the matching dies. And I love that this set has matching dies for all the images, and of course it's Pink & Main, so they're adorable pink dies. So I'll run that through my little mini die cutting machine, and then we've got our perfectly cut out bike. I'm also going to run a circle die through my die cutting machine over some of the pattern paper, and then I have all my pieces ready to go. I have a card base cut down. This was cut down to 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches and scored at 4.25 inches. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that that's good and scored. And then you'll notice I have a bunch of patterned paper pieces that I've cut down. They're about 1 inch each. And I'm going to just paper piece those onto the background. This is just a fun way to use different patterns. And since everything in the Pink & Main kit is so matchy-matchy, which is one of my favorite things about the kits, this just makes making cards super easy. Imagine cutting out a bunch of 1-inch strips, and then you could make a whole stack of cards this way, doing maybe even interesting ways to put them on there. So I'm just going to use some liquid glue to adhere these down. And I'm staggering them, but I am leaving a little bit of that blue showing through on each of the sides. So that way it'll just really come through. I love this paper. This cardstock is so gorgeous. That's that Tunisian Princess by Basil. And it's definitely one of my favorites. I love it when Michelle includes those in the kits. I tried to trim that down thinking that I could just conserve paper, but I had gotten glue too far up. So I'm going to have to use this piece. And then I will trim this one down. I had plenty of that one, and then I'll just glue that down. I'm going to let that dry just a second or so, and then I'm going to take my scissors and then I'll just trim off all of that excess. You could easily put this into your guillotine trimmer or even your wire trimmer, whatever you have, and then you can trim this down pretty easily. But I just love the pattern that it ends up putting, and then you use good amounts of that pattern paper as well, and you're left with something pretty. I'm going to use that liquid glue to adhere down my circle, and then I do decide I want to pop the little bike up using some foam squares. But before I do that, I'm going to stamp out my sentiment. I just have a strip of some white cardstock. I'm going to ink that up using some blackout ink by Ink on 3, which is the same ink that I use to stamp out all of my images, minus the gray images and this blue image. That is a Copic friendly ink, and it is also watercolor friendly. So I'll put down my bike, and then I'm going to take my strip with the sentiment on there, line that up on my glass mat, and we'll put that down also. I'll trim off the excess, and then I'm going to grab out those enamel dots, and I'm just going to put 3 of them down in a line, and I'm going to use 3 of the same size. Just kind of checking that out on there. And because I didn't push these down too hard yet, I can move these around just a little bit. So you'll notice my spacing's a little off, so I can move those. It's okay, as long as you don't press down too hard. But once they're down, they're down. And that's going to finish off our first card. Card number 2 is going to be a mini slimline, and if you don't know what that is, we will talk about dimensions here in a second. I am going to use all 3 of these little ice cream cones that I had stamped and colored, so I'm just matching up their die, and I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine 3 different times so that I can get all 3 of those cute little ice cream cones cut out. Now, as I said, it's a mini slimline, so basically what that means when it is closed, it is going to be a 3-inch by 6-inch card, and those will fit into, I think it's called a number 7 like coin envelope, and those will go through the mail just fine. So I already have a card panel cut down, and it is cut down to 3 inches by 6 inches. I'm going to cut down this piece of pattern paper down to its 3 inches, and then I'm going to cut. I'm trying to figure out what size I want it to be. So at this point I'm just kind of trying to look at that, and then I think I cut it down to about 3.5 inches. And then I'm going to take just another little piece of some patterned paper so that I can have a border. And I've taken out that leftover strip of white cardstock because I wasn't sure how I was going to put my sentiment on there. It turns out I will make it straight. I wasn't real happy with the idea of it being turned sideways or crooked, not crooked or sideways, but diagonal. There you go. All right, using some liquid glue, I'll adhere the patterned paper piece down to my panel. I'll put some glue directly onto my card panel and then attach down my little yellow border. And then for my next step, I'm going to stamp out my sentiment, which says treat yourself. Perfect for little ice cream cones. You could shove a cute little, like, I don't know, Brewster's or Dairy Queen gift card in there. That'd be fun. And then I'll use some foam tape behind all of my ice cream cones. I'm going to attach down the 2 outside ones first. And then this way, if they overlap a little bit, it'll look like that middle one is standing out further. And then I also put some foam tape behind the sentiment. So I'll use my glass mat to try and line that up. And then I'll attach that down as well. Trim off the excess. And then I'll get my card base ready. So in order for you to make a card base out of this, you're going to need 6 by 6. So I'm going to go ahead and score that at 3 inches. And so it'll, again, be 3 inches by 6 inches as a card base. Awesome. And I have used pattern paper before to make a card base. I mean, it'll be a little less firm or thick, but it works out just great. Now I do want to pull out some of those flat back sequins that came in the kit, so I'm just going to put those into a little tray that I have. Take my crystal katana and just arrange those out on that background, and then use my liquid glue to adhere all of those little pieces down. Super fun. I love all that and all that color in the background, but I couldn't stop there. I did have to pull out some glossy accents. That ice cream was just begging to be shiny, so I pulled some of that out. It's going to look a little milky as it's on there, but it will dry clear. You could even take like some chunky glitter and put a little bit of that on there. That would be fun, but I just was so enamored with the idea of these being shiny. But remember, that will take some time to dry, so set that off to the side. Regardless of how badly you want to mess with it, don't. Keep it away from your cats and set that off to the side. So there is card number 2, this fun mini slimline. Card number 3 is going to be a fun fold card. So I went ahead and cut down some cardstock. I have some yellow cardstock that I cut to be the exact size of an A2 size card. So that's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I did cut down some white cardstock to be a little bit smaller than that. So about 4 inches by 5 1/4. And then I have some pattern papers that I have picked out. I'm going to take this one because I think it's gorgeous. And I am going to just cut this diagonally from one corner to the next. And that's going to go, it's basically going to wrap around our card. This piece is going to wrap from the top down, so I do need to trim this down to be 4 inches, and I'm going to leave the excess on it, so this way I can wrap it around my card. Now, if I had just been thinking, I would have probably just scored it at like 1/2 inch and then cut off any of the excess. I was trying to line it up perfectly, which didn't end up working out because, that has to wrap around that paper, and in doing so, because that white cardstock is a little bit thicker, it's going to cause it to kind of pull up. And so I will have a little bit of white cardstock showing, and that's fine. Honestly, it's not going to be a big deal. So I'm going to just score that line and make sure that it's nice and tight. And then I'm going to use some liquid glue to adhere that down to the back of that white panel so that it'll be just like a little flap for that white panel. Because there's some of that excess white showing, I'm going to pull in my guillotine trimmer and I'll trim that off. So we'll just trim off that excess. Like I said, it's too small to really worry about. And now what I'm doing is I'm lining this up so that the triangle will fold over. So what I did is I lined it up on my glass mat so everything was nice and straight. And then I took my panel, my little purple panel with the white piece behind it, and just move that over until both of the top and bottom on the left hand side touched the edge. And that's where I marked it with my pencil, and then I scored it with my Scor-BUDDY. So that way it'll wrap around perfectly and there won't be gaps at the top and bottom. And yes, obviously there's going to be a little bit of a triangle on top and bottom, but I can trim that down later. So let me show you again. I line that up on my glass mat, and then I'm just trying to make sure that my panel is going to line up nice and straight, and then I'll mark that so that I know where to score and where to stick that down. That's all going to get covered, so don't worry about pencil lines. Bring this into my Scor-BUDDY, and then I will score that piece right there. I'm doing front and back just to make sure that I have a good crease. All right, so then I'll check it again. Everything will be good to go. And I'll take that liquid glue and just put it on that part where I'd marked from top to bottom, and then glue that and wrap it around. And then I'll do that with the other side as well. Like I said, you're going to have a little bit hanging off that top and bottom. You're going to have little triangles. You could use those for something else. But once everything is nice and dry, I'm happy with how that's adhered. We're going to stick this into our guillotine trimmer and trim off all of those excess triangles so that everything will fit perfectly. And like I said, you can save those for something else. And I love these little fun folds. I think I've done this one once before, but they're just so fun. And it gives the recipient this really cool effect with their card. Now I'll just glue this down to that yellow card base that I had, just so it'll have a nice little yellow border all around it. And look at that. So when you open it, that's how it'll go. I want it to stay close, so I'm going to make a belly band. And so I cut 1 inch of the glitter cardstock, the purple glitter cardstock that came in the kit. And it's not going to go all the way across. That's fine. We don't need it to. I'm going to take this cake that I had colored, and I'm going to use the matching die, line that up, use a little bit of washi tape to line that up, and then run that through my die cutting machine. And I'm also going to die cut a circle. And that is what's going to cover up that gap. So before I adhere those, I'm going to stamp out my sentiment. So I've just got another scrap of white cardstock. I'll stamp down my sentiment, kind of trying to center that up just a little bit, and then I'll trim that down. And then I'm going to put some liquid glue on the band, and I'll slap down our circle. Just trying to make sure that's fairly centered. But when I wrapped around that band, I didn't do it tight. So just keep in mind that if you want this to be able to come off and on easily, don't wrap that band super tight. Otherwise, you'll never get it off, and then you won't be able to get it back on if you do get it off. I used some foam tape behind the cake. And now to adhere the sentiment, I'm going to use foam tape again, but this time I'm just going to adhere it to the circle. That just makes it a little bit easier. Just 2 little strips next to the cake. I can peel that off, peel off the release paper, and then I can put down my sentiment nice and straight. It's a good day to eat cake. Every day is, right? At least that's my motto. And then I'll take some of those gorgeous glitter enamel dots, and I'll adhere a couple of those to the front. Now keep in mind, you do not want to put this half on the circle and half off, because then it'll stick to, and you need that belly band to be able to move up and down. So easy enough. And there is our card. So I'll take off that belly band and show you how fun this little card is, and you have plenty of room to write to your recipient on the inside. How fun is that? It's like a little hidden message in there. And then your belly band will go on very nicely, and it'll fit beautifully into an A2 size envelope. For card number 4, I decided to bring in that Hooray die, and I went ahead and already cut out the presents, but we are going to use some pattern paper for the word Hooray. It's just such a cool die, and I like how it'll go almost all the way across the front of an A2 size card when it is going the shorter end, from short end to short end. But it's cool. So I'm cutting that out of some purple pattern paper, and then I have some of the glitter cardstock that I'm going to use for the shadow. And I'll run that through my die cutting machine as well. That purple pattern paper that I have chosen along with that glitter cardstock just really, really pops. So I love when dies have their little shadows as well. For my card base, I cut that down to 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, and I'm scoring it at 4.25 inches. And so I'm going to have this green card base, And with that pattern paper, I am going to trim this down. I started out trimming it down 4 inches by 5 1/4, but I will trim just a tiny bit more off of that, because I do want to, after I've seen that purple glitter cardstock, I decide I want some of that to be backing that as well. I'm cutting a couple of strips of it to go behind this white piece of paper. That's going to house my Hooray word. And so I'm just going to take a little bit of glue and put that on the very bottom part of it, and then line up my white cardstock on the top, just so that I can get a little bit of a border on the top and on the bottom of this white piece of cardstock. So just lining that up on my glass mat, and then I'll manipulate that as I need it, you know, depending on how much I want to actually show. And then, like I said, at that point I decided I definitely had to have some backing the pattern paper. Now, if I'd been thinking, I would have trimmed down the inside of that glitter cardstock so I could save that chunk on the inside that no one's going to see for something else, but I wasn't thinking. It wasn't until I had already adhered my pattern paper to my glitter cardstock that I was like, darn it, I should have cut out the middle. So keep that in mind. You can save cardstock that way. I'm going to trim down this piece just a little bit more. I want it to only go to the edge of the glitter cardstock, and so that nice green border will show all the way. And then I'm going to adhere down the word Hooray using the liquid glue. And the reason I'm using liquid glue to adhere everything to that glitter cardstock is that tape runner just isn't going to cut it. You might have some luck with some like heavy duty like score tape or something, but I definitely have always had luck with the liquid glue. I'm going to stamp the word Hooray 2 more times. So I've got Hooray, Hooray, Hooray when you look at the card. And then I'll go ahead and adhere this piece down using the same liquid glue. And then just kind of try to figure out where I want that present to go. I had cut 2 of them thinking I would put one below the word Hooray and one above, but I don't decide to do that. I'm going to use some foam tape behind the word, and I only decide to just use the one present. So I'll glue that down, and then I'll peel off the release paper on my word and stick it down. And I do decide to move the present down just a little bit, so thankfully nothing had quite adhered yet. That's another reason I like liquid glue. Have a little bit of wiggle room. And then I'll take the other present and go ahead and just adhere that to the inside of the card. And that's going to finish off card number 4. I just love that Hooray die. That is a perfect one to start building a stash of word dies. Our final card today is going to be a slimline card, and you'll notice I have a bunch of pattern paper all cut down. It's basically going to fit this feather just perfectly. I am going to heat emboss on each one of those pieces. So I am taking a magic powder bag over each one, and then I'm going to ink up my feather with some juicy embossing ink. Stamp that down, cover that with some Brutus Monroe Alabaster embossing powder, which is just a great fine detail embossing powder. And then I'll hold that with some reverse tweezers and heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And I am going to do that for each one of those pieces that is sitting there. So we'll repeat that process a bunch of times. And we'll have all of these beautiful feathers. Then when those are all heat embossed, we're going to need to cut them out. So I'll take the matching die and tack that down with a little bit of washi tape. And then I'll run that through my die cutting machine, and I'll repeat that process each time for each one of those. And when we're done, we'll have all these beautiful feathers ready to adhere to the front of a card. My panel is cut down to 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. So this would normally be for me the whole front panel of a slimline card. I'm going to take the stencil that came in the kit, and I'm going to use PIXIE spray. I don't know that you need it. I think it's probably fine. This is a pretty sturdy stencil, but I did it anyway because I just like to do that. And then I'm going to use my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, and I'm just going to tack that down. You'll notice I put the ruler across the very bottom. That way I don't have any overlap, so I don't go past the stencil. But one of the things I've noticed over the last couple of months is that Pink and Main has made stencils that are continuous. So they work perfect for any card that is bigger than a 6x6. So you can just kind of line those up, and then you can continue on with what you were doing, and no one's the wiser. It's like the stencil was made for slimline. So I'll just keep stenciling that across. I use my mini Ergo blending brush along with some I think that is some Simon Hurley Woof ink. So it's a light gray ink and it's super, super pretty. I actually am going to trim this down. I'm actually going to trim it down to 3¼ inches. So that way I can have a nice little border on one side when I attach this down to my card base. So my card base was cut to 7 inches by 8½ inches. And I'm going to score that at 3½ inches. So that when it's closed, it'll be 3½ by 8½ inches. And now I'm just taking those feathers and I'm lining those up. And when I'm happy with how I have those lined up, I'll take some liquid glue and adhere those down. And it's when I go to adhere down the gray one that I think to myself, I would really like for these to have a little bit of dimension. So I'm going to stick it down, like really prop it down at the bottom. And then for each of the rest of these, I'm going to use a foam square to pop up the top so that there will be some nice added dimension to each of these feathers. And so that'll be the process for each one from here on out, all the way down to the bottom. And I don't end up using all those feathers on the front. I am going to end up using several on the inside, but each of those feathers gets used, which is fun. And I love how it looks, the white heat embossing looks on that beautiful patterned paper. Now for my sentiment, I love this sentiment. You are a gift to me. I pretty much feel like everyone in my life is a gift to me, especially all y'all. You guys have been so amazing with all of your, just everything you guys do, the commenting. I just feel like this is such a beautiful community and you are a gift to me. So thank you for how much love and support you guys have shown, whether it be just watching, even if you don't comment. I know you, I see you, I love you, thank you. And if you do comment, thank you. If you like it, subscribe, all that, thank you guys, because it really does help me continue to keep making videos. And I love doing it because I know that for some of you, it really does inspire you to keep getting creative, and that is the reason I do this. All right, so I'm going to attach down my card panel to my card base. It's that light gray cardstock that came in the kit, and I love how that's just so subtle on that background. And I kept a little bit of that border on the right-hand side. So now I'm taking the scraps, well, that one scrap, that purple scrap, I adhere that to the inside, and then I'm going to take the leftover feathers that I have, and I'll just adhere those down to the inside as well. And if I have any that will hang over, which I will have a little bit, I'll just trim off that excess. That's fun. And I like having stuff kind of hang off the edges because it gives the illusion that there's more going on outside of the card. And then I couldn't stop there. I had to grab those beautiful sequins, and I'm going to be pretty liberal with how many I put on there. In fact, I have a bunch sitting there, and I end up grabbing even a couple more to adhere down to the front of this card. I just didn't want to stop. Those sequins are so beautiful, and they really pop on this background. All right, so that's going to finish off card number 5. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at all 5 of the cards that I made for you today. I would love to know which one was your favorite. If you did have a favorite, go ahead and leave that down in the comments section down below. As I say every time, I love reading those comments, hearing which ones you guys like. I may not always be able to respond to them, but I definitely read them, and I love y'all. Y'all are amazing. So yeah, go ahead and leave that down in the comment section down below. If you liked this video, hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. I typically have 2 to 3 videos a week, and I would love to keep having you around. So thanks y'all for stopping by, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye everybody.